Hello and welcome to the Woke is Broke podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Stanko, and let's get into it. So, top story, Don Lemon is fired from CNN? Well, it appears that way. So, they are indefinitely suspending him for reasons that have really been made public for quite a while now, right? Back when his brother Andrew Cuomo was going through the whole sexual harassment scandal, turns out his little brother Chris got over there and started helping him with working PR, working behind the scenes, helping him to manage, which is kind of an issue, ethically speaking, when you are a anchor on prime time for a news network and your brother in question is the governor of New York. It's kind of an issue, right? But, CNN, they initially kind of, smacked Chris's wrists and then let him back on. And then more details come out recently saying, oh, not only did he help his brother, manage the PR aspect of the whole sexual harassment claim, he actually went after, Chris, you actually went after the women who were sexually harassing Andrew Cuomo, in order to dig up dirt on them, right? Destroy their character, destroy their credibility, essentially. And now CNN kind of has their hands tied and they're indefinitely suspending him. And I want to be clear. Let's not pretend that CNN gives a crap about ethics or about sexual harassment, right? If they did, would they have hired back Jeffrey Toobin after he masturbated on a Zoom call in front of his coworkers? Would they keep Don Lemon employed after, you might not know this, 2018, I want to say, 2018, he's in a bar down in Florida, Don Lemon, and he sticks his hands in his pants, and he wipes his nuts, and then he takes out his hand, and then he wipes the ball juice on a bartender's face and says, hey, do you like the slang word for a woman's reproductive organ, or do you like dick? That happened. Look that up on DuckDuckGo. Don Lemon wipes testicle sweat on man's face. Look that up. You'll find out in short order. Yeah, again, let's not pretend that they give a crap about sexual harassment or about morality or anything like that. That has nothing to do with this. This is a strategic decision. All right, there's a couple of reasons. The bigger reason, more than anything, I would say, is the Andrew Cuomo situation. The reality is that Andrew Cuomo is easily the biggest dirtbag in modern American politics. Hands down. He is hated by everyone, not just Republicans, by Democrats, by the people who worked with him, who worked for him, who spun news for him on the news networks. They all hated this guy. He was a giant piece of crap. All right, but he was a useful piece of crap, particularly during COVID, which is why they were spinning him as the opposite of Donald Trump, the savior of New York, spinning everything for this guy because he was useful, right? And when COVID eventually waned down and he stopped being useful, and then Letitia James comes out with these, basically the collection of sexual harassment claims against Cuomo in order to get him out of the gubernatorial office so that she can then take his spot, the Democrats are like, well, we never really liked this guy anyways. And, if we're being honest, we could never actually say this out loud, but we are a little bit upset that, he is, in fact, the greatest mass murderer in modern American history, short of Governor Whitmore out in Michigan. And I know what you're saying. Isn't that hyperbolic? Isn't that a bit of an exaggeration? I don't know. You tell me. What do you call a man who takes people who he knows is sick with a disease, that he knows kills old people, and then puts them into nursing homes, right? And then lies, trying to cover up just how many people he got killed in those nursing homes. And the thing that kills me about that more than anything, right, is that the whole reason that he was sending people into nursing homes, right, was so that the hospitals wouldn't become overcrowded, overflooded, right? Meanwhile, Trump sent military ships off the coast. They were outside the ports of New York that were meant to be triage centers that they could send COVID patients to so that the hospitals wouldn't be overburdened. They remained empty. Cuomo didn't send any of those people there because he didn't want to give Trump a political win. So what did he do? Instead, he put sick people into nursing homes, getting thousands killed, and then attempted to lie about it. If I took a hand grenade and threw it into an open window, and I knew that there was a family of 7 behind that window, I would know that my action was likely to get people killed needlessly. Andrew Cuomo knew that his actions were going to get people killed needlessly, and he did it anyways for political purposes. And yeah, whether the Democrats can admit it or not, and they certainly can't, they can't admit that at all, it does bother them. It does bother them that this guy is responsible for killing lots of people. It does bother them that he's a giant piece of crap that they don't like, and so that they threw him under the bus. And CNN, they jumped on that too. They threw him under the bus as well. Only big problem, their hands were tied, because now that they've essentially painted him as being a giant rapist in the news and everyone having to go back and smear this guy's, reputation, well, now they're kind of in a jam when his brother goes behind their back and helps him with the PR situation. Now, some of them like Chris, and that's fine or whatever, right? But it kind of makes them look bad. It becomes scandalous when they have one of their primetime anchors helping out a guy that they've essentially just portrayed as being a rapist, right? And so, they slap his wrists a little bit initially, and then this thing keeps dragging out, becoming more and more scandalous, and that leads to the second reason why they're dumping Chris Cuomo right now. And that's because they can't afford any more scandals at this point. Their viewership is in the toilet. It's going down progressively. It has been since Trump left. It was way down before Trump was ever in office. Trump was the only saving grace to CNN that got their numbers up a little bit. And now they're just tanking and tanking and tanking and tanking. And now there's talks about CNN being bought out and maybe having the so-called journalists be replaced with actual journalists, right? Having things changed up. That's been being talked about behind the scenes. CNN's in trouble, and they know that. They can't afford another scandal. So getting rid of Chris Cuomo was more of a strategic decision than a moral decision. It was never going to be a moral decision anyways, because CNN is not a moral company. They're a news network with an agenda, and they're not unique in that, right? Every business, I would dare to say, every business, some sort of another, every news network is going to have some kind of an agenda, right? And that's fine. That doesn't mean that there can't be a basic collection of moral guidelines that you're following when you're operating that business and pursuing that agenda. But CNN doesn't have that. They don't have a moral code. They don't have an ethical code. They don't have a code. Their agenda is a Marxist one, plain and simple. It's about power. It's about corruption. It's about lies. It's about doing whatever they have to in order to hold on to their influence and their monopoly on information, which they've been losing more and more and more as more conservative outlets start opening up on YouTube, on Rumble, on Spotify, on news networks, right? Newsmax, OANN, I think it is, right? All these things opening up left and right. They're losing their monopoly on control, and they're desperate. And they're desperate to hemorrhage the bleeding, and so they get rid of Chris Cuomo to avoid another scandal. Now, why didn't they just outright fire him, right? Why is it an indefinite suspension, and is that the same thing as being fired? The answer is it could be. It could be. There are a couple of reasons for why they chose to indefinitely suspend him. Two reasons, really, both of which could actually end up being true simultaneously. One is that it doesn't look very good when you have to outright fire one of your primetime anchors, right? That in and of itself could be scandalous. So indefinitely suspending him, effectively being them firing him, is just a way of, prettying up what's actually happening. The other option too is that they're leaving the door open for him to return at some later point. Right, this is something Brian Stelter actually talked about the other day. He says Chris could be back in January, and he very well may be. This may be permanent, or it could be, until CNN feels that Andrew Cuomo is no longer going to be in the news cycle, and whenever the heat dies down, then they'll bring him back. I don't know. It could go either way. I don't think Andrew Cuomo is going to leave the news cycle. I think he's going to try and come back as governor at some point down the road, and I think CNN's hands are going to be tied. So either way, I think Chris is going to be off the air well beyond January. Personally, I could be wrong. Could be 150% wrong on that. But I'm certainly hopeful that it's permanent for sure, because I have no love loss for that guy. He's a jughead at the end of the day. I mean, let's not forget his brilliant wisdom. What was it, last summer, when he said, tell me where it says that protesting has to be peaceful and nonviolent. I don't know. How about the right to peaceably assemble? How about that? I mean, the guy is just a propaganda. It's just an absolute hack. He's not a journalist. He's an op-ed just voicing whatever pops into his head at any possible moment. There's no facts behind any of the crap that he says on a regular basis. And he's a habitual liar. He does it all the time. You might remember that video that he posted, I think it was like last year, the year before, of him lifting a 100-pound dumbbell at his desk. As somebody who pumps iron on a regular basis, I can tell you that the weight he was lifting was absolutely not 100 pounds, not by any means whatsoever. It's just absolutely ridiculous. He just has to lie about the most ridiculous shit. So, but honestly, I kind of wish that I had a couple dozen cigars that I could just pass out to strangers in order to celebrate this, because honestly, I am a little bit happy that that Jughead is out of CNN at this point. I don't know, maybe we'll get lucky and we'll get rid of the the walking advertisement for birth control, Brian Stelter. And maybe, the blatantly racist Don Lemon later on. That's just wishful thinking at this point. But in any event, moving on. In additional news, Dr. Oz, right, the medical genius, Dr. Oz has a pretty big announcement. He's announced that he is running for the Senate in Pennsylvania as a Republican. And I guess, good on him. I don't really know a lot about his politics or about him personally. I never really got involved, as I was never like a hard Dr. Oz fan or anything like that. I do remember in high school, all of my science teachers were really pissed at him over what is called the Oz effect, which basically, Dr. Oz is so huge and he makes all of these, medical, gives all this medical advice, right, on his show, all these recommendations that people just kind of instantaneously accepted as fact, and some of which isn't necessarily accurate, at least from my understanding. Going back again to what, my science teachers in high school were saying, at least at the time, I do remember him testifying on Capitol Hill, Dr. Oz, saying obviously that there's no magical pill for weight loss, despite the fact that the whole reason that he was testifying on Capitol Hill was because he said on his show, this is a magical pill for weight loss. So, when it comes to any doctor who's also a public figure, obviously we should take anything that they say with a grain of salt and scrutiny and do our own research, right? In the same way that we should, I don't know, maybe take anything Dr. Fauci says with a grain of salt. Maybe a shit ton of salt with that guy. I mean, he's kind of burned through his credibility altogether. But yeah, I mean, he's running for a Republican senator out there, and he gave kind of an opening statement about all this that I think is troubling. It speaks to the trouble in the Republican Party overall. I don't think it's troubling for Dr. Oz personally, but let me just read you what he said, and I'll explain. So he says, I believe in energy independence. That's a big deal here in Pennsylvania. But we don't, as a nation, want to be begging other countries like we're starting to do to change what they're doing with energy because, we're in hock. I believe in capitalism, which means lower taxes and regulations, so people can really compete. And I respect the Constitution, a brilliantly written document that I think should be honored on the bench and sometimes isn't. Now, he also stated that his philosophy centers around liberty, freedom, and that to me means limited government, right? So he used all the hot words, right? He used all the key words, right? Limited government, right? Tax cuts, energy independence, right? Talked about the Constitution, right? And the issue is, when it comes to Republicans in particular, is that the reason Democrats have dominated the cultural sphere, why they've been winning the culture war for a very long time, is because Republicans haven't been fighting it, right? Democrats for a very long time would make their campaigns about cultural issues. Meanwhile, Republicans would respond with, oh, yeah, but look at our tax plan. That's awesome. Or look at our immigration policy. Or we're going to limit government. We're going to cut down on government, which they never actually do. That's a promise that's literally never been kept. I mean, when's the last time you saw a Republican get into office and actually start scaling down the unelected bureaucrats running all of these different agencies that power has been given to? I mean, it's a promise that sadly really hasn't been kept in the way that it's been made, at least. It might be a little bit here and there, but not in the grand scheme of things, right? But that's the wrong thing. I mean, if your opponents are running on a cultural issue and they're winning the culture war, you can't come back with this tax break, energy independence crap. You need to be doing what Glenn Youngkin did. You need to be going after the culture war. You need to be fighting the culture war, and you need to present a different cultural argument. Otherwise, Democrats are just going to continue to win. Tax breaks, energy independence isn't going to cut it overall. Like, now, when I said that I don't think this is a problem for Dr. Oz personally, what I mean is he's running in Pennsylvania, right? Energy independence in, say, New Hampshire or Georgia isn't going to be a key selling point, right? But when you're talking about Pennsylvania, and what was it, like 60,000 people laid off at the beginning of this year when Biden got rid of fracking, right? Energy independence, that's going to be a pretty big deal in the state of Pennsylvania. And you match that with the, the fact that he's very notable, he's very well known, he has a huge platform. I think it's a shoo-in for Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania personally, unless the Democrats cook up some amazing figure that can just beat Dr. Oz and beat energy independence in Pennsylvania. I don't really see that happening, though. It's my own personal opinion on it. But yes, Republicans really need to really take a note from Glenn Youngkin. They need to be fighting the culture war, and they need to get rid of this dinosaur mentality that tax cuts and limited government and hitting all these keywords, the Constitution, liberty, and freedom is going to be enough. No. The issues at hand are not taxes, all right? That's an issue, right? Inflation is obviously an issue, but it's not taxes. It's not energy independence. The key issues hitting Americans harder than anything right now, just like critical race theory, right? Gender theory, right? Was it systemic racism? All of these things being fed to them by the companies they work for, by the companies that they shop at, by their schools, by their politicians, by the news networks that they watch, by the TV shows that they watch, by the movies that they watch, the music that they listen to, right? These are the key issues, and this was a huge issue for the parents in Virginia. That's why Glenn Youngkin won in a landslide victory, right? I mean, and the gender theory one, that is one that really, really needs to be addressed. All right? Because let me just be clear. 90% of children who experience gender dysphoria grow out of it by the time they get through puberty, right? And the 10% that don't, well, guess what? They now belong to a subgroup of people that has a suicide rate of 50%. 50%. And there is an overt movement going on right now in schools to intentionally confuse children, to intentionally try to ensure that, tell them that gender dysphoria is not a mental illness, which it absolutely is, and to encourage them to become part of that 10% that never grows out of it, right? To increase that 10%. And guess what happens when you intentionally shift children into that 10% that never grow out of it? They now belong to a subgroup with a suicide rate of 50%. That is going to get children killed. That is going to get people killed in the long run, because gender dysphoria is a real thing. It is a real mental illness, and we should not be encouraging it to anyone, to children in particularly. Why? Because it's a mental illness. Why is that so hard to understand? I mean, honest to God, we shouldn't be encouraging that any more than we would encourage children to be schizophrenic or bipolar or manically depressed. All right, sorry, that's just a hot topic for me. But I mean, again, these are the cultural issues that Republicans need to be tailoring their attention towards and abandoning this Ronald Reagan argument. The Ronald Reagan arguments of the day, right? Low taxes, limited government, right? Secured borders, hampering our enemies on the international stage. These were all great selling points in the 1980s, right? But we are not in the 1980s anymore, and the problems we are facing today are not the same as they were back then. That's not to say that we don't have issues with high taxes or inflation or enemies on the international front. Those are all issues that need to be addressed. But the issues that press harder than anything else right now are the cultural ones, because a country that is attacked from the outside can build back up, but one that crumbles from within, there's no coming back from that. When Rome collapsed in on itself, it didn't come back from that. Okay? And these cultural issues, they are killing us slowly on the inside, and they need to be addressed. They need to be addressed. So, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know a lot about Dr. Oz's politics. We'll have to wait and see, assuming he wins, where he's going to go from there. And but in any event, that wraps up our little updates for the day. I hope you enjoyed the episode, but in the meantime, I am Joshua Stanko saying stay safe, stay informed, and God bless, guys. We'll catch you later.